Hey Brendan, it's Thursday. Happy birthday to you. I hope you have a grand birthday and that you enjoyed your time at Batman v Superman. I happen to be in Missoula for Easter, so this won't be the most visually interesting video that I've ever had, but I'll try to do my best here. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Passover bread. And for those of you who are not Catholic that are watching this video, I strongly encourage you to listen all the way through to the end because there's some really beautiful symbolism in all of this. See, for me it started out with a question. Why does the host have to be wheat? And to understand why we have to use wheat, we have to understand some things about traditional Jewish law. See, Jewish law says that the matzah bread that they use, and that matzah bread I actually went out and got a little bit of, but that unleavened bread can actually be made from 5 different grains. Matzah bread can be made from any of those 5 different grains, including spelt and oat. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. See, one of the things to remember about the matzah bread that we consume both at Mass and at Passover, if you're Jewish, is to remember that it's a particular kind of bread. It's a bread to remind us of the suffering and slavery of the Hebrew people by Egypt. And so it's actually called the bread of suffering, but that same bread at the end of the Passover feast becomes the bread of freedom. And I think there's a lot of really powerful symbolism contained in all of that. And we partake of this bread of suffering, and the reason it's bread of suffering is that it is because it is literally just flour and water, and it is not leavened. It is not flavored, there's no salt, no sugar added. But it's also the bread of freedom because it's pure, it's simple, it's golden, and that's a really important idea that we're going to get to later, the idea that the wheat is golden. And so it's also our bread of freedom. I'm not an official Catholic theologian by any means. I'm not trained in the Jewish religion. I just saw a lot of this really cool symbolism when I was researching this question, and I really wanted to share it with others. They take so much care and attention into this type of bread to make sure that it doesn't ferment. So why wheat flour? Well, if we go back to the sources in the Bible, we see that Jesus, of course, celebrated the Passover as he was getting ready for his own passion. So as Catholics, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of bread did Jesus use? That seems to be kind of an important question to us to determine what kind of flour we ought to use. In Exodus, a plague of hail comes and knocks out all plants, except it says specifically barley and wheat. And it says the barley and wheat were left, but then the locusts came and they ate all the green plants. Everything that was green in the land was eaten. Well, if you've ever seen fields of wheat, after they've grown and fully grown, they actually turn to a golden color. And so they're not green, they're not necessarily eaten. And so the Jews of the time took this grain, ground it, didn't leaven it, just mixed it with a little water, and then baked it and set out on their journeys. Now I'm greatly sort of condensing everything that's going on here just to kind of give you a snapshot. The upshot of it is it seems like the Jews very likely used wheat and not barley in this case. Now that leavening process is actually kind of interesting because if you mix flour with water, it can actually start to ferment in as little as 18 minutes. So the process for baking has to be set up in such a way flour and water are mixed and the baking occurs very, very quickly afterwards. So the best argument that can be said for it is that wheat is the most fitting to use in these cases. And the reason we can say that is there's an association, particularly at the time of Christ, between gold, wheat, and God. Gold represents not only kingly dominion, but it also, at least in our traditional ceremonies, represents something that is grand and wonderful and divine. And wheat is associated with the gold. Now I know that sounds really odd that wheat would be associated with gold, but just as when we were learning our colors as kids, think red, we think fire truck, we think yellow, we think banana, or maybe taxi. In the same way, a common man at the time of Christ would only know by seeing wheat fields. And so there was a strong association between wheat and gold. And so when we go to our Mass and we receive Christ, we receive him in his body, blood, soul, and divinity, and we also receive him in his kingliness, in the gold that we receive of him. And let's see if I can't pull out a piece of matzah here. I actually did take a bite of this a little earlier, Brendan, and it does taste very, very familiar. It tastes like Sundays, I guess is the best way I can put it. And that's how we came to know that our bread is wheat bread and why wheat is the most fitting of them. Brendan, you need a challenge. I want you to write a Fruit Kills Planets. I want a lot of action, and I was out.